I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli, and I write about theater for the New York Times.
And I'm Peter Marks, until recently, theater critic for the Washington Post. We're here for you with another edition of Marks and Vincentelli, which, of course, sounds like an ambulance-chasing law firm, but in fact chases down all the vital developments in the theater world. Great as always to be with you, my partner in theater crime.
Oh my God, Peter, I think you should describe yourself now as a loose cannon. I think loose cannon. I am Peter Marks. I am a loose cannon.
Right, indeed.
Well, okay, so January, February, cold. But, theater never goes cold, at least not for us, even though critics have been accused of having cold hearts, but not ours. Still, it's a challenging time for productions because, after Christmas, it's always tough. There's always a tough moment, but there's still interesting stuff happening. So today we're going to talk to an actress who has a very big role in one of the plays that are doing very well, contrary to what I just said. It's actually a play that is doing well. So clearly, when you have a connection of subject and actor and cast and production and audience, it can work. We're seeing this with Appropriate, which is doing great, and with this play, Prayer for the French Republic, at Manhattan Theater Club's Samuel Friedman Theater.
So our subject is a drama that's attracted a lot of buzz. It's by Josh Harmon, and our guest is one of the linchpin performers of that play, Betsy Aidem. The show runs through March 3rd, with Betsy in the central role of Marcelle, the mother in a contemporary Parisian Jewish family. The play is set in 2016, and with anti-Semitism on the rise in France and elsewhere, Marcelle and her family are confronted with the question of whether there is still a place for them in French society.
So the even larger questions in this time-traveling play have to do with the anti-Jewish hatred that is deeply embedded in European societies, specifically the French one, which, of course, I'm completely in a very good position to talk about being from France. Betsy is in a really good position to talk about how this issue plays out on stage because she also had a major role as Grandma Emilia in Tom Stoppard's Tony-winning Leopoldstadt. I can see this podcast is going to be a challenge for my accent. It's going to be hard, which dealt with some of the same concern. Fortunately, a specific show that I know Peter loves to hear me pronounce involving a cartoon character will not come up today. So,
oh, darn.
No. And by the way, I think we need to mention that Betsy is also portrayed Lady Bird Johnson and Katharine Graham in All the Way. So clearly there's like a kind of affinity for strong women.
Yeah.
So now, welcome to the podcast, Betsy.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. Thanks.
I feel like we have a pulse on what's happening right now.
Hard not to. If your eyes are open and your ears are open
Yes.
and you read the news, you know what's going on in the world.
Yes.
So Betsy, just to give us a little prologue here, give us some background on your the trajectory of your career. Tell us about where it started, how it evolved.
Oh boy, God, it's so long. No podcast can carry it all. I came to New York in the summer of 1976. I had transferred out of Mills College without knowing what I was going to do. I was an art history major, and which is, still remained one of my loves. But I came for a summer program at Circle in the Square, and I auditioned for NYU 2 weeks before the semester started in 1976. And in those days, there was no criteria to get into NYU. You basically could, if you had a check in one hand and a needle sticking out of your other arm, they'd have taken it. It was like everybody got in.
I think it still works with the check part of this.
Oh, yeah, but that check now is about $75,000.
Yes.
In those days, it was probably like $2,500. So I went to Circle in the Square. One of my teachers, Nico Sakaropoulos, ran Williamstown, which ended up being a place that I started getting parts to go and do the second company, which was a touring company. And people who saw me there then hired me to do some early plays right after I graduated in 79. At the WPA Theater. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh,
show.
yeah.
Kyle Rennick ran it. So I did like 4 plays with them, including Still Magnolias. And then it just, things came from that. And it was always my goal when I started was to have a range, to not develop a quality, to be able to play as many different kinds of people as I possibly could. So that kind of led me. And I never thought about trying to be in film or television then. It just didn't, it seemed like the whole goal was to be in the theater. It was that was the it wasn't a means to an end. It was the end as far as I was concerned. And it still is for me. So I've gone all over the country. I've did a 19-city tour of Europe. I've played Paris, Vienna,
In what show? What were you doing?
I did a crazy, I call it my junior year abroad, but I was 30. It was 1,000 Airplanes on the Roof. It was a David Henry Hwang 90-minute monologue set to a Philip Glass score.
Oh my God.
And so we did, London, Paris, Milan. I played 3,000 people in Milan. And you know what? I get just as nervous when I'm doing a Ain Gordon play for 88 people in Lexington, Kentucky in an auditorium. It's like, it's storytelling. Doesn't matter the size of the venue. It's like, what is the responsibility of what you're trying to communicate is the thing that will make you either, nervous or excited. So that's a bit of the trajectory. And, a lot of regional theater, I would follow the parts because if the parts came to me, I would go, that's the part that, I did. It's interesting this season they're doing Appropriate and Doubt. I did the very first workshop of Appropriate. Then I was doing All the Way when they first did it in New York.
Wow.
Then they asked me to do it at Westport. I was thrilled because I really wanted to have a crack at it again. And I love Brandon. I just think he's so gifted. And then a few years after that, they offered me Doubt. So I feel very lucky that I had both those parts under my belt to ready me for Marcelle, because she is so complicated and there's so many different relationships she has with so many people in the play that bring out a different part of her. And I think those 2 plays made me ready to be able to do this.
That's wonderful. I just have to say, Betsy, this is a weird convergence because I too took classes with Nikos Sakharopoulos.
No.
As an undergraduate at Yale, I was in his acting classes for a number of semesters, and you got to go to Williamstown. The dream for undergraduates at Yale was to be asked by Nikos to go to Williamstown.
I remember that.
And
he asked, the first time he asked me, it was to be an apprentice, and my parents were like, hell no, you're going to work for minimum wage at a mall, and we're not paying for you to do slave labor. And so I did. And then the following summer, they offered me $50 a week, and that was at least a salary. So.
Oh my God. That's so cool. Yeah. So anyway, it's wonderful to hear that name out of your mouth. Yeah. He terrorized me, but that's another story.
Everyone, I think.
Yeah. So to start off, you've had this wonderful progression from Stoppard's Leopoldstadt to Josh Harmon's Prayer for the French Republic, and both of those plays strive for a certain emotional and historical authenticity, and obviously there are connections between them. But I was wondering how much of your own research you had to do to invest in these eras that you evoke so beautifully, by the way.
Good question. I'm kind of a research geek. When I played Lady Bird, I went down the rabbit hole with the Caros, and then I flew myself to Austin, and I met the archival librarians, knew her. Whoa. I went to the ranch. I went to the Lady Bird, Wildflower Center. I ended up meeting her great-grandchildren and her daughters. I steeped myself. I listened to her voice. I love that part of doing it. So for Leopoldstadt, I think what I started with was George Clare's Last Waltz in Vienna, which was a great resource, piece of resource material. And, aside from the art and architecture and design books about Viennese art, which I, always had loved anyway. Right before we started this again, I read The Oppermans, which takes place in Germany, which is an incredible lost novel. I just finished Suite Française, Irene Nemirovsky, which I just love. And I read The Postcard over the summer because it was sort of the book that was out, that was new. Being raised in I was raised in the South for my early childhood, and then we moved to Phoenix when I was, I got 6 or 7, and we joined a temple, and they showed the sorrow and the pity when I was way too young. So I was haunted by Holocaust imagery all my life, and so, would wake up from nightmares, and
Oh my God.
So I always read the obituaries of Holocaust survivors. I always am drawn to any articles about it and only found out in August that that was my own family connection. It took a long time to trace a tree through my family of where my great-grandmother and great-aunts disappeared in Poland in 1941. Yeah, so comes full circle. So
I was wondering if also what kind of conversations in terms of preparation you had with the directors and casts of these 2 shows. Like, did you have moments of working together on that?
Yes. I mean, Josh Harmon is just an incredible resource because this is based on his family. It's not exact. He's changed some of the facts. When I went to Paris to do research in September, I went to the Holocaust Museum and saw the name of his family members, who had been taken in 1938. I went to the old synagogue in Paris for a service, and I looked down because the women, it was Orthodox. I didn't, know where I was going. They were very gracious letting me come in. There were no armed guards, but there were men with baseball caps on, which I thought was really interesting. And seeing photographs. So Josh shared a lot of family stories. I went to visit where his grandparents survived the war on the Boulevard Beaumarchais. He was helpful telling stories. Marcelle was an amalgam of various relatives. As far as Leopoldstadt went, that was we had an incredible dramaturg, and there were pictures and books and maps of Galicia. And, there were everybody had personal stories. Stoppard is very choice about what he decides to reveal or not reveal. And sometimes if I was I'd ask him for help, and he would be very oblique, but so kind. And, he really wanted us to figure it out for ourselves. So I spent so much time trying to figure out the distance from Kiev to Lvov that my character had supposedly walked, and which pogroms she might have been run out by. And, I never came up with a definitive answer. There were so many pogroms through the 19th century that it could have been, and figuring out the age that she was supposed to be in 1899. So you can lose your mind doing research.
That's so true. I'm steeped, as you are, Betsy, in Jewish history at the moment, which is just a litany of trauma. And I'm reading Simon Schama's book, his second volume of the history of the Jews, which is really just a record of one pogrom after another. But I found it interesting, Betsy, Lucien, the character who is your son, Marcel's son in the play, you alluded to the fact that you saw men in baseball caps. It's important to note that Marcelle is constantly in the play trying to get her son to wear a baseball cap over his kippah, his
Daniel,
yarmulke.
Yes.
Oh, Daniel,
However,
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Lucian is my great-grandfather.
Right.
Listen, I have to do that monologue at the beginning of the play to orient who was related.
Yeah,
I still get confused.
Yeah.
My husband comes in after having had a panic attack and says it isn't about the baseball cap. It's about how people really feel. And when I walk down the streets of New York, I don't know if either of you have this experience, and you see a young man with a yarmulke on at this moment in history, and you think, please be okay.
Right.
Are you okay? It seems so brave. Sometimes you see them in groups, trying to get people to fill in or on sukkahs or whatever. But when they're alone, I always think, I say, my character says, you put a huge target on your back. Here I am. Right. Now is not the moment to walk around with a sign that says, here I am on your back.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
Did you, can you tell us a bit about Marcelle? Because you've played her off Broadway at Manhattan Theater Club a couple of years ago, and now on Broadway. Right. And what was she like as a character? Was that a person that you could relate to, or did you have to kind of get to know her? When they first called me to do a workshop of this play in January of 2020,
I was on my way to Fort Leavenworth prison, an army base, to direct a thing for Arts in the Armed Forces for Adam Driver's company. And
Huh.
I got
Wow. Okay.
the
We're
yeah.
going to have to circle back to that. Okay.
Yeah,
I
right.
did a couple of trips on a naval boat and on an army base with that company, which I think they've dissolved it, which is too bad because it was really meaningful to go do. But I got the call that they wanted me to do this workshop, which meant I'd have to fly back a day early from Kansas and not do the prison part of it, but just do the part for the people in the army. And I was like, I read the thing in one sitting, and I was like, I know who this lady is. I can't not do this. So we did a week-long workshop with David Cromer, and some of the people were the same. Frances was there, Ari was there. It was so clear to me how extraordinary the writing was, and which I really responded to. So Marcelle, for me, is like the dream role of my career. She's so complex. She plays so many roles in the play to all the people in her family. She is so full of contradictions. She'll be attacking a person one moment and breaking down the next. She blames her brother for not owning his Jewish identity. And you realize that she's also been kind of hiding hers from her own father just because how much it frightens him. All the things you want to have going for you, the humor he's written into this part of what a fool she can make out of herself, the irony, her shame, her sexuality with, a good marriage, her relationship to her children, having a child with mental illness and not coping as well as she should, given the fact that her profession is a psychiatrist, her forgiveness that she has to find in the course of the play for the things that, she's carried for a long time. It's just, it's endless. I'm never finished.
Yeah, I was curious about this idea, Betsy, of she's the person most resistant to basically giving up her French identity. I mean, this is so, and I wondered if that had resonance for you. We all, if you're Jewish especially, I don't know how, even if you're not observant, I'm not talking about you, but, my levels of observance over the course of my life have been limited. But, there you do have this bifurcated sense of yourself as a Jew versus as a citizen of the country that you live in. And, I wondered if that something you had to process in playing Marcelle and figure out where your feelings lie.
All that imprinting from early on, from going to Hebrew school with boys that were a year older because my mom didn't want to, do 2 carpools a week. And I was the youngest one. I was the only girl. The teacher, the assistant teacher, had just fought in the 6-Day War. You have these memories of things of going, you carry it with you. I think the strongest thing that of, my growing up Jewish, because I am not that observant, is tzedakah, your sense of charity, how important that is, that you give back what you can give back. I think that's important. I think, when 9/11 happened, we all thought, like, how can we stay here? Is it safe to be a New Yorker? There are things that happen that you say, is it time to go? Where do you feel safe? Everything feels less safe. We're in the middle of a crazy corruption and, election cycle right now that it's, here I am talking about Marine Le Pen. She's the perfect stand-in for Trump, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, and how we feel about what he's perverted in this country. And, I just said that on tape, so you can use it.
How did your approach to the character and the play? So you did it off Broadway in 2022.
Yes.
Now you came back, and how? So I would say first, 2-part question. First, how has your approach to the character and the play has it evolved over the past couple of years, and how has the play itself changed? Because the context it was already bad enough 2 years ago. Because I think we were fresh off the Tree of Life attack. It was, there's always something. But I feel like now it's even more fraught. And it must have given just another perspective even to the play.
I would say it was impossible to ignore, and yet Josh Harmon, who said he did not want to drag this new version to the moment that is now. He wants the audience to come to the play that he wrote, taking place in 2016. It's impossible for anyone sitting in the audience to not kind of have those things coexisting at the same time. Your awareness of what the world is, and even if it's something set in the fairly near past, I think it affects everyone. It has changed for me because we changed 6 of the men, were recast, and you build this family and you fall in love with everybody, and then you've got a new family, so you've got to build new relationships with them. Think certain aspects of your relationship are different. You find the softer places because you have a different kind of child or a different kind of husband, or your father is sturdy, or whatever it is that it changes you. And Cromer he's just incredible about hunting down the truth and finding a way to be as honest as you possibly can, and the way that your character shows their worst self, that you don't idealize the character, that you don't emotionalize too much if you can possibly, that you say what you mean to the person you're talking to as often as possible, and you wait to hear what they have, how they're going to respond. He says that over and over again. That's why we have these little get-togethers. He has these phrases that he uses to remind us that we're there to just create a real world amongst these people. So it has changed. There's a little bit of rewriting on Josh's part for the 1944 storyline, or maybe 46. But almost everything I have is the same. A little bit less. We did a few trims, but I think it helps it move.
I was curious also if you feel that the audience has changed in the past 2 years, because I think most of audience members really underestimate how much the actors get from the audience on stage. I feel like a lot of people think there's some kind of one-way mirror, like we can see you, but you can't see us. That is not true at all. Like you are very, very aware of us in the audience. And
you can hear conversations, sometimes going on.
Right. So I'm wondering if you felt an evolution in the way audiences have been responding to the play in the 2 years, or if it's kind of the same, or if you've done talkbacks.
I think that it's I think it's much stronger reaction, particularly with Elodie's position about French and American Jews' relationship to Israel. I think there's a very strong feeling about what the obsession is. How do you separate out anti-Semitism and anti-Israel? That's in the play. And you can feel the audience having a response to that. There are things that used to get laughs a couple of years ago that don't now. There are things that get laughs that didn't before. So there are things that have changed. But you definitely feel, a lot of people say afterwards, I learned so much, that it was incredibly entertaining and hilarious. And they were embarrassed to be laughing at things that were just horrible, but they learned a lot because there's a lot of information. Josh gives you, he doesn't underestimate the intelligence of his audience ever. And I think that's a gift, to be able to play to people that you're saying, you come along with us.
What's interesting to me is that, we're told now that, audiences want relief from reality. They want things that aren't going to, make them think too deeply. And here you've been in these 2 plays,
yes,
Betsy, one after the other, that have obviously struck a deep chord with audiences.
Yeah.
Leopoldstadt ran, it's like in dog years, endlessly for Broadway. It ran an entire season. Prayer has been extended twice, I think, already. There is I think you're finding a hunger for context and understanding.
I think the substantive nature of it is definitely turning people on. I think the kind of remarkable thing is they're in a season where the cult of celebrity is very high. I think the audience's ability to engage with characters without knowing anything about who we are personally. I'm not on any social media. I don't keep up with what's going on in the world. I put the craft above everything. And so I think if you have years and years of experience being on the stage, people absorb it. It's like when you go to museums and you see a Corot painting and, you can see a Matisse in the same room. They're both equally fantastic. They have nothing to do with the same century, but it's like, it's exciting because it's craft. It's like incredible. There's something artistic to it. And, they're not distracted by your status or what else they've seen you in. You are just, maybe they've seen you in other plays, but they are entering into the story in a very unfettered way.
One other thing I was curious about before I can tell that Elizabeth has a question, but I wonder, you mentioned that Stoppard left you to your own devices.
Yeah.
Did he not bring, the fact, many people now know that he discovered his own Jewishness
Yes.
late in his own life.
Mm-hmm.
Was there not an interrogation of that with the cast? Did you
Well,
feel
he
like
did
that was not?
interviews at the time. I went and saw him speak at the 92nd Street Y, and, there was a profile on him in the Times, and he really revealed a lot about it. And so I think I was looking for connective tissue at one point for a final speech that I made at the end of the act that I felt like I didn't know how to connect the dots. And he just said, I think if you just say it, it will make sense. You don't analyze it. Don't get in your head about it. Just each thing has its own value, and it
Right.
will
Don't
follow
overthink it.
suit. So he said, I'm not being helpful. And I'm like, no, it's okay. It's all right. I hear you. He didn't want to pull that apart. And Patrick Marber was really good about pulling a lot of things apart. I didn't have to do 1938 in that play. So I was not going through a trauma every night
Right.
the way I really am going through a trauma in Prayer for the French Republic. I got to come in, be sort of comic relief, be worried for my family. The last thing I said was, God, give my grandchildren the desert. And look where we are now. So it's very interesting how both of these stories, and I've played so many nuns, I've played Muslims, I played poor, white trash, I've played so many different kinds of people in my career, archaeologists, grifters, heroin addicts, and it's just ironic that this has come to me at this moment, and it's a gift. I feel so grateful to be able to connect my own history into this moment.
Well, actually, you just mentioned having to pretty much act or be in a trauma.
Yeah.
I realize it's a really basic question, but as someone who's really not an actor at all and does not have a headshot, unlike other people in this conversation, well, the question is simple: is how do you do it? Is there a moment of dissociation where it is Marcelle doing that, and Betsy is like, okay, now I'm going to take a step back, and Marcelle is going to take in, and then you can, some actors have this on-off switch.
Yeah,
And
I don't have an off switch. I think that's part of my problem. I should go into therapy for it. I feel like part of my training, which was very early on, kind of methody, and then I moved to more of my imagination and text work. And I think the combination of all those different ways of going about it, I am having a lot of visitations of people that are not with us anymore that I bring up with me. And nobody needs to know how or why I do that, how sensorily they come to me or I conjure them. But it helps me locate the roots of certain emotional things that I can't not go to, because they're big epic things that people go through, leaving behind a parent, feeling abandoned by a familial relationship, being tortured by the fact that you don't have a good relationship with your daughter, thinking your husband's going to abandon you. Those are pretty primal things. And the fact that I have to touch on all of them and at some point in the play, I have to get my sleep. I'm very disciplined about doing yoga, trying to stay as healthy as I can. So I don't have this throbbing around in my other waking life. I can kind of focus it on the story because it's so well written and it's so well directed by David. When you have that kind of confluence of things, it's like you're being held in a vessel that can contain all those things. Does that make sense? Does that sound too?
No, I mean,
No. Yeah, I was going to say, no, that doesn't sound woo-woo at all. In fact, I was going to ask, because you've directed, you mentioned having directed in some exotic places, as well as probably less so, Betsy. But I was wondering, is directing a way to open up yourself as an actor? And do actors always make good directors? You know, Cromer obviously is in a play right now in New York.
Yes. Yes.
What do you think makes a great director?
I think people who've acted definitely have a facility with a language that can help unlock certain things. You know, they tend to be a little more process oriented. However, I've worked with great directors who haven't acted too. So I love doing it because I loved being part of the figuring out the timing of when somebody needs to hear something, when it's going to unlock something. I loved having design meetings and like getting like my lighting designer. I had great fortune with my when I did Doll's House Part 2 with Rick Fisher was doing lights. I had an incredible music sound person. He was amazing. They help you. They bring every element. My set designer had this whole idea that like, Torvald had burned the house down. So it was charred. There are things that then give you information. So I loved doing it, and I'd love to do it again. I also had directed at NYU and done another workshop. But, it's hard to, I'm 66. Picking up another hustle right now is just like, how do I do it all? I don't even know what's next. I have no idea what's in front of me.
I can relate.
I wanted to circle back to A Prayer for the French Republic because I think one of the things that was really interesting to me when I saw it, I've not seen it on Broadway yet. I saw it off Broadway, so I'm going to go back. But one of the things that was intriguing to me is like I feel partly deals with one thing that I think Americans are not very aware of is the fact that in France, there are two very different groups for the most part of Jews. There is Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews, and the cultural differences between the two are very strong, very strong.
Yes.
And I remember talking about it with some American friends who had no idea about that. Like, for instance, when you talk about Jewish humor in France, people immediately think about the Sephardic style. They don't think at all about what people here think about. It's just a different kind. It's like a lot of couscous jokes and things like that, and and so it was. Have you heard reactions about that? I'm just interested if you've had people talking about that because it's just a really big thing in France that I had never seen dealt with in an American story.
No, it's interesting because I do say to the young character of Molly, I say most Jews in France today, the vast majority of their roots are North African.
Right.
She says, why? I said, when? I say, because they left in the 60s. She says, why? I said, because it stopped being safe. If you follow history, it seems so obvious to you, why did people end up creating,
Actually, there is a whole Jews of color movement in this country.
Right.
And in fact, in theater, there's a Washington theater called Theater J that has commissioned a whole series of plays by Jews of color. Sephardic Jews are not known to American Jews. I mean, they're, but it's not the dominant, it's true Ashkenazi. And there is this, there's a term even for like the dominance of Ashkenazi Jewishness. I forget what it is. But Ashkenazi normative. I can't remember what the heck it is. But anyway, it's a whole strain in Jewish life. So it's interesting
to me. They
make
the better Herosis. I know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They make it with dates instead of apples.
Yeah, that's That's a
That's my poignant addition to this conversation.
Exactly. A Passover.
No, and in Paris, you can see you can go to different neighborhoods and see it's a very different than New York. That whole community, and the Hidalgos synagogue that I went to, I could it's a Art Nouveau building, and I couldn't tell whether it was mostly Ashkenazi or Sephardic. The women that let me in looked Sephardic to me, but I did, I don't speak French, so it was hard for me to know.
Well, we should let you go, Betsy. But before we do, I'm just curious. You're in this show till March 3rd. Do you know what you're doing after March 3rd?
I have no idea. I'd love to keep doing a play, but it's hard to keep a play going that isn't driven by I think there's an audience for it. I mean, we are selling, I think we're the second best selling show that MTC has ever had. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Wow.
Yeah, in a 50-year history, that's pretty remarkable. So, I've been in long runs before. I did Steel Magnolias for almost a year. I did, A Lie of the Mind for about 6 months. I did All the Way for, a long time. These things, they come and they go. You have no idea what's next. You don't know stylistically whether it's going to be granular realism or restoration or Shakespeare. You have no idea. You just hope that the angels who've looked out for you, and I've had many of them in New York and around the country, the people that, ask to work with you again. And that's a great thing. And maybe somebody new, we'll see.
Or this could, there's been talk of other productions, original, or it seems like it's such a...
I think it'd be interesting to do it in Paris. They do it obviously with Parisian actors, but I think it would be very interesting for them to do it in Paris.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Well, we greatly admire what you're doing right now on stage, Betsy Aidem.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for being our guest, Betsy.
Oh, that was great. You know what? I always love having actors on the show. Actors and pretty much I love having anybody on the show because I love talking about theater with people who do theater. So you can see Betsy in Prayer for the French Republic at the Samuel Friedman Theater on Broadway through March 3rd. And apparently it's the final extension, as Betsy intimated. So, you know what to do.
It's one of those rare opportunities to see a serious play on Broadway. And this was another good episode for us, Elizabeth. As you said, smart actors are endlessly interesting.
Absolutely. So until next time, I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli.
And I'm Peter Marks. You can subscribe to Marks and Vincentelli on this link, marksvincentelli.substack.com.
So I'm on X and Threads under my own name, and Peter's on Threads also under his own name because you know what? We can take it. And we both love feedback, especially nice feedback. Actually, mostly nice feedback. So, tell us what you think. Bye for now.